Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching with Rabbi-Cantor Hilary Chorny.
How nice is it to be outside in this breeze? What? Isn't it great to also see the kids playing behind us and enjoying the field? How great is it that we get to gather together and actually do Torah study during the summertime? And other such rhetorical questions. I was just trying to think of some good ones for the moment. Rhetorical questions are used by speakers to make a point. And rhetorical questions have been used both in speech and in literature for many, many generations. The Bible, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, is thick with them. This week is an anniversary of my bat mitzvah parsha. I had both Chukat and Balak several decades ago. And I have a favorite bit of Torah about that parsha and about its haftarah and about the Torah in general, and I'm going to impart it to you. The theory is entirely mine, but it all originated in a class with Rabbi Amy Kalmanovsky, and I'm going to teach you a little bit more about that. If you'd like, keep your chumashim handy. Keep your Eitz Chaim books handy or share with a neighbor who has. You don't need them, but you might want to flip around and take a look at what it is that I'm pointing out. So Bilam, we didn't read about him today from the Torah, but he's there. It's such a bummer when it's Chukat Balak, in my opinion, because Balak is the oasis of narrative in the sea of rules and censuses in the book of Bamidbar. There is a talking donkey and a wizard and magical transmogrification of blessings and other such big words about the magic that takes place in that parsha. Briefly, you may be familiar with the idea that Balak encountered Bilam and recruited him as a sorcerer for hire. That was something that was a known entity in their time. What was Bilam hired to do? To curse the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. So we're going to skip over all the fun donkey encounter part. We'll skip over the narrative pieces that tell us that Bilam was exposed to God, that God exposed and revealed God's self to Bilam. And just know that the tension is building to the time when Bilam is climbing a mountaintop and looking down at the Jewish people. He opens his mouth to curse them, and what comes out? A blessing. The most famous of which, because this takes place 3 times, is a phrase that the rabbis fix for us upon entering any sanctuary space, including a sanctuary space like this one that is temporarily constructed. What do we say? Ma tovu halecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu, how beautiful are your tents. Yaakov, Jacob, the name of the people of Israel. Mishkenotecha Yisrael, your dwelling spaces, Israel. This is what we call tikbolet. It's 2 things said different ways. And by the way, just to start us off, is ma tovu a rhetorical question? That was a rhetorical question, I guess. Ma tovu, isn't that a rhetorical question? That's a rhetorical question. Ma tovu, how great. Ma, what, is utilized in this sense biblically as a how. How great is it? How great are your tents, Israel? He's not looking for an answer. It's a declaration, and in this case, it's a blessing. But that is not the rhetorical question that I want to point out. As you can see from the first source on the front page, from Bamidbar, Kaf Gimel. We're in the 23rd chapter of Numbers. We get to verse 11. Balak has spent his hard, conquered money on this sorcerer. And he says to Bilam, Vayomer Balak el Bilam, me asiti li, lako voivai lekachticha, vehine berachta varech. What have you done to me? Here I brought you to damn my enemies, and instead you have blessed them. That's the one time I'm going to say damn from the Bima. That one too. Ma asita li. Let's break that down. Ma is what? Ma is what? It's like, who's on first? Ma is what? What is la asot or oseh or asa? Do. What did you do? Asita, that's the suffix. Li, to me. What did you do to me? That is his question. What is the purpose of Balak asking Bilam the sorcerer this question? Ma asita li. What is his purpose? Why would he say those words to the sorcerer? Is he looking for him to respond? Probably not. So what is he looking for? What's the purpose of it? What's the meaning of saying ma'asita li? Translate that into a different phrase in English for me. Right, what did you do to me? Okay, but give me in parlance, like how else could you say, what did you do to me? I want you to be an actor who's in an improv class. What did you do to me? What else could you say? What did you do to me? Yeah, thank you. Brant said something very interesting. That absolutely was fitting. Yeah. Maybe a curse, right? Actually, literally, right? He might have said a curse to him, like, dang it.
More of a what the hell, man?
Yeah, exactly. What the what? What the hell? What'd you do? More curiously, what's Bilam's response? Well, Bilam, at this juncture in the narrative, has not yet been convinced that he's sort of like possessed by God, so to speak. And so we've got more narrative to go. But the purpose of the question is not to invoke any sort of action or maybe even any response. Is Balak even really talking to Bilam? Do you think he's really talking to him? No, you don't think he's really talking to him. Who's he talking to? Himself. Okay. Who else could he be talking to? To God. I agree with Janet. I think if I picture this scene in the movie that's not yet been made, it is confounding to me that we don't have like a great Hollywoodized version of this story, because it's a great story. So if there are any producers listening to this podcast or here, I think it's a great story. And if I were to structure the setup in that scene, I think Balak will be screaming at the skies, right? The king, what have you done to me? I spent all my money. I hired you to curse them, but bless them, you have blessed them. So it's not there to invoke any particular response. It's just to like scream out in anger and frustration. This is not what I set out to do. Look at the next bit. Why is Micah on this page? Anyone have any ideas about why I would put some verses from Micha on a page where we just jumped from the Torah all the way to the prophets? Why Micha? The Micha is this week's Haftorah, it's this week's Haftorah also in Israel where they're just reading Balak. Meaning when we read Balak, we read these verses from Micha, from the prophet. Micha is one of those people who conveys the frustration of God towards the Jewish people. In chapter 6, verse 3, which Mark read eloquently for us and which I chanted on my bat mitzvah morning, Ami me'asiti lecha uma heleticha. What have you done? Me'asiti. What wrong have I done to you? Me'asiti lecha uma heleticha. What sort of terrible things have I wrought upon you? Anevi. Go ahead, testify against me. Who's talking in this verse? I heard over there. God. God is talking. Micha is conveying God's comment. What is God saying to the Jewish people? What have I done to you? Now be a parent. Give me a rephrase. It's an improv game again. How do you say, what have I done to you? Why do I deserve this? By the way, what's the this that he's complaining about? their behavior, the behavior of the Jewish people. God is always frustrated, and the prophets are always trying to let people know just how frustrated God is with their behavior. How would you say this as a parent? What have I what? Say it loud. What did I do to deserve you? Why are you my people, these people who can't seem to get their act together? I think the translation, if I'm writing it, is probably, what have I ever done wrong to you? Are you not aware of all the miracles I, God, have bestowed upon you? What have I ever done to you? Go ahead, Anevi. Go ahead, you tell me, what have I ever done to wrong you? Now, that's a dangerous game God's playing, but they don't answer, fortunately for him. But it's the same formulation. Rashi wants to point out something. Rashi says, Me'asiti lecha ten libecha lehakir ma tov asiti lecha. I want you to direct your heart, God is saying to them, and you check yourself. What benefits I have done for you. In other words, in that moment where they're feeling, where God is feeling particularly frustrated, the Jewish people, he says, why don't you think about all the wonderful things I've done to you? All you do is complain. Think about it. So what's the purpose of the question, Me asiti lecha, what have I done to you? Is he screaming at the heavens, God, so to speak? Is God screaming at the heavens, or is there a different purpose for Me asiti? What have I ever done to you? What's the purpose, Marlene? He wants the people maybe to realize what good has happened to them. And does he want to change anything? Does God, rather, want to change anything by making this statement? Say a little louder, Hannah. Maybe even change their minds. We see an enormous gap between the first ma'asita li, between what have you done to me, which is just an outcry, and me'asiti lecha, what have I ever done wrong to you? Trying to invoke and induce some other behavior. Here's the thing. Once you start looking for this phrase, you find it everywhere. We're going to time travel back to Bereshit, starting at the bottom of that first page. Vayomer Adonai Elohim le'isha. And then God said to the woman. Who's the woman in Genesis chapter 3? There's only one of them. It's Chava, it's Eve. So he says to the woman, Mazot asit. What have you done? What is this you have done? What is God complaining about or saying something about? Eating the forbidden fruit from the forbidden tree. Mazot asita vatomer ha'isha. The woman answers him. She does not see this as a rhetorical question. Hanachash hishiani va'ochel. God goes, what have you done? And she goes, the snake told me to do it. Is that the same kind of rhetoric as we see later in the Torah? Is it the same kind of rhetorical question? Was God looking for a response? What do you think? Did God want Eve to respond when he said, what have you done? Is that more Balak-esque? Or is that more God in Micha-esque? Is God looking for a change in behavior in that moment, or just furious? Maybe just furious. Why don't we look at a bunch of other times right around there when God says the same phrase? Let's look at it together. We're in the third. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Great. So this might be a great why, asking why, because why she did it might actually change the consequence that he chooses for her or that she encounters, because she does have a consequence for eating from the forbidden tree. Is there more? Great. So there's this whole thing that unfolds where now she's eaten from the tree. So now she knows what's good and she knows what's bad. But even knowing what's good and knowing what's bad, she responds, the snake made me do it, which might tell us why she had the consequence that she had. Let's dig deeper into this rhetoric, into this pattern. Now, briefly, I just want to say that I looked at some of the commentaries on this, and Sforno is of the opinion, and it's just one opinion. You can have your own. Sforno, who's an Italian commentator, comes and says that the mazota seat means amarzel or rare gam ota el hatshuva. He thinks that God says this to arouse a sense of tshuva in Eve. He's of the opinion that he says, what have you done? Because he thinks that because God thinks perhaps Eve will go, oh, what have I done? But she doesn't. Okay, now we're up to chapter 4. We have a new figure. We have two brothers, actually, two figures. Who are they? Who are our brothers in the chapter 4 of Genesis? Cain and Abel. And Cain does something Rather terrible. He commits fratricide. It's the first murder that we have in the Torah. And God says, you can say it with me, Vayomer me asita. What have you done? Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama. What have you done? Behold, your brother's blood cries out from the earth towards me. What have you done? Now, what's interesting, I didn't bring this here, is that what is right before this, when God asks, where's your brother Cain? What does Cain say to God? Am I my brother's keeper? What kind of question is that? That's a rhetorical question. So perhaps we're actually in this pattern, and it's a little bit of an unhealthy pattern, where he says, am I my brother's keeper? And God says, what have you done? And now nobody's really talking to each other at all. Rather, God is crying out, and Cain says, am I even my brother's keeper? We're all talking past each other. And then we get later in the book of Bereshit, and we have Avram, and Abraham is traveling with his wife Sarai and encounters a situation where the Pharaoh is lied to. Who lies to Pharaoh? Avram lies to Pharaoh and says, this is my sister. And then Pharaoh almost takes her as a wife. And when he has a terrible dream and he wakes up and he realizes and freaks out, he's nearly done something terrible by taking someone else's wife. What does Pharaoh say to Abraham? A different Pharaoh than, of course, the book of Shemot. Vayikra Pharaoh le'Avram vayomer, ma zot asita li. What have you done to me? Lama lo higadita li. Why didn't you tell me? Ki ishtecha hi, that she is your wife. What have you done to me? Is he looking to change Abraham's behavior? Maybe. He might be looking to change his behavior, or, say a little louder. This one's a little less, you think it's a little less rhetorical. He's, what have you done to me? If it were less rhetorical, he would be asking Avram to actually respond to him. What response would you think Pharaoh would want from Avram? What should Pharaoh say? What should Avram say back to Pharaoh when he says, what have you done to me? You tried to trick me. What does he want to hear from Avram? I'm sorry, I deceived you, my liege, guy who has a lot of power in this area, who might be really dangerous. That is not, by the way, what happens in the story. Instead, we get an echo of the exact story in the next generation. Yitzchak tries to pull the same trick now on a guy named Avimelech. Look at the second page. What happens? Vayikra Avimelech. Now Avimelech has been tricked by Yitzchak, who somebody noticed that he was very clearly intimate with his wife, who he tried to sort of pawn off as being in a different position. Vayikra Avimelech la'Avraham, and now Avimelech cries out to Avraham, Vayomer lo, me asita lanu. What have you done to us? Umechatati lecha. Emechatati lecha. Now we have both phrases. We have, what have you done to us? This is because in the story of Avimelech, plagues have begun to come upon all of the people. So it's not just Avimelech who's worried for himself, but worried for his people. But he also says, Ume chatati lach. And what have I ever done to you? What does that sound like? Which other source did we say, and what have I ever done to you? Where did we see that just a moment ago? In Micha. In Micha, God says, which Micha, the prophet, obviously, maybe not obviously, many, many generations after the Torah, becomes an echo of this phrase. What have I ever done to you? Now, God, later in the later books, his response is that that God wants to know, what have I ever done to you? But the first place where we ever hear this in the Torah, it's a human being making the comment. And then we get to the book of Shemot and the story of the Exodus. And we're right at the end of the story, and the Israelites are about to go and have this experience crossing the sea because Pharaoh finally said, go, you've killed the firstborns, I can't take it anymore. And then Pharaoh has a moment, of course, where his heart is hardened again, and he changes his mind. And what does he say? Vayugad lemelech Mitzrayim, Kivarach ha'am v'hafech levav paro v'avadav el ha'am. That's the story. His heart changes, and then he changes. It's told to the king of Egypt what's happening. His heart changes. Vayomru, and he says, Vayomru, and they said, Ma zot asinu. The Egyptians say, what is it that we have done? Ki shalachnu et Yisrael me'avdenu. What's different about this particular mazot? Asita, asinu, etc. What's different? It's plural, and they take responsibility. I'm going to translate that a little bit too. They're realizing that they've done something, and now the question for the very first time is a reflective rhetorical question. What have we done? What have I done? Every single other instance to this point that we've seen is, what have you done? What have you done to me? What have you done to us? But now we see mazot asinu. What have we done? It's like we're learning, and the question is evolving. I'm coming to the end of this by bringing us way, way, way ahead to a book that we're going to be looking at in approximately 3.5 weeks. The book of Lamentations, the book of Eicha, which begins with what? Begins with the word Eicha. And what is Eicha after all? But a rhetorical question. What does Eicha mean? How? But it's not just how, as in, I want to know how this worked or is working. It's how, as in, give me your best Eicha flavored how. How? How is it? How could it be? Eicha, looking at the destruction of our holiest places. Eicha yashva vadad ha'ir rabati haita ka'amana rabati v'goyim sarati bamdinot haita lamas. Eicha, how could it be that this city that was once so glorious is now sitting lonely? On this, I bring you a commentary from the Akedat Yitzchak. At the very bottom of the back page, we'll skip over the second to last one for the sake of time and say the following. This comes from the Midrash on Eicha Rabati. So this is a commentary, on the entire book of Eicha, in which we get a mashal. We're going to get a parable, a story that we should understand this rhetorical phrase by. But Midrash Amar Rabbi Levi Shlosha Amru B'Lashon Eicha. We learn in the Midrash from Rabbi Levi that 3 people in history use this term. Eicha. How? How could it be? Who are they? Moses, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. This can be understood by the following mashal, the following story. A lady of substance had 3 intimate friends. One of the friends knew her when she was at the height of her beauty and wealth. The second friend knew her while she was committing all manner of excesses, overindulgence, and so on. The third friend knew her only when she had already fallen into disgrace. Thus Moshe saw Israel at peace and said Eicha when Israel was at peace, and at a high level spiritually. Yet he proclaimed this, Eicha, how can I alone carry the burden of your quarrels? And then Isaiah, who knew Israel at a time when she committed all kind of excesses, proclaimed, how has she become a harlot? Meaning that out of a sense of surprise, disgust, thinking terribly about the actions of the people. And then finally, Yirmiyahu, who knew Israel after it had fallen, said, Eicha, in Lamentations, Eicha, just what we read, that how is it that she sits alone now? In other words, Eicha, as a rhetorical question, is read entirely differently. Those 2 syllables, that one little word, read differently in every single context, even though it might have seemed that those 3 prophets had expressed and exclaimed in exactly the same way. Rhetorical questions, as we see them in the Torah and throughout the Hebrew Bible, seem to reveal a lack of self-awareness from the person who is speaking about the intention of the question that they are asking. We ask a lot of rhetorical questions, don't we? We do it all the time, particularly when we are in a position of power. And every single person who was quoted in this source sheet was in a position of power over the person they were speaking to. Pharaoh, Avimelech, God, Micha, quoting God. When we're in a position of power and we ask a rhetorical question, the responsibility is on us to know when we ask that question, whether it is entirely rhetorical or whether we are looking for a response. When we aren't aware of it, all that can come in the future, all that can come in response is dissatisfaction. will never be satisfied unless, and this is the exception, unless we're certain that the question is simply rhetorical. And I'll leave and end on that particular note. The Torah gives us permission sometimes to ask rhetorical questions, so long as we know that they are truly meant to be rhetorical. Sometimes we need to say out loud, "What have you done? What have I done?" And let it lie. We're not looking for a response. We're not looking for the person who we're speaking to change. But instead, we're looking towards that question to allow us to look reflectively in the silence, like the Egyptians did as the Israelites marched toward the sea, and say, "Ma zot asinu, what exactly is it that I have done?" That is a rhetorical question, and I think that's very interesting, isn't it?
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.